Hello, hi everybody. How are you? Hope you are doing well. So I have received so many questions from students asking how to write uh, a proposal and how to do the introduction part, how to do literature review, and how to do the methodology part. I have explained in previous videos in details, on these three chapters, but I think also that students still, confused about how to write an effectively research proposal. So today we are going briefly, maybe within 10 minutes, to explain in a simple way how to write these three chapters. We start with chapter one. As you know, in chapter one, I told you that those are the component of chapter one, which is background of study or introduction, problem statement, the set question, objective of the study, the significance of the study, and definition of the keywords or the construct. So in the introduction, actually, you start with an overview of your topic, of your phenomenon. You know, maybe you start from general and you keep narrowing down to a specific. Let's assume for simplicity that your topic you want to study the impact of COVID-19 on economy of Malaysia. So in this case, you maybe first will give an overview of the Malaysian economy, how the Malaysian economy, is doing over the years. Then you may start also after another section, you give lessons from past pandemics like SARS, influenza, and uh, and other diseases that we know it. So you give uh, what are those the impact of those past pandemics on economic in the global or in the world, in Asia, than in Malaysia. So after that, maybe you will find what is actually the relationship between these pandemics and economic growth or GDP. Particularly in Malaysia, you can also start from a wider, from in general and global, then maybe in Asia, then in Malaysia. So after you establish that relationship, which is we say that it is a correlational relationship, but does not mean that the pandemic has an impact on GDP, where only we can observe that the presence of the pandemic is related to the we say less performance of maybe the GDP, and then you can notice that there is an opposite relationship when we have let's say more pandemic or the severity of the pandemic is high, the GDP will decrease. You may find that relationship, for example. So to do that, you can use graph, you can use tables, and to explain that relationship. Then after you do that, you can go now to your problem statement. And in the problem statement, you may show how serious the impact of those previous pandemics on the economy and particularly in Malaysian economy. So actually when you discuss very well in the background of the study about that relationship between the pandemics or past pandemics and economic growth or GDP, it's very easy for you now to raise that concern that COVID-19 now should also may have a severe impact on the Malaysian economy. And you propose this for solution. You may see this is need to further investigate it to know what exactly in depth the impact of that COVID-19 on the Malaysian economy. So after you do that, which is now very easy. The problem statement actually is also a question, but it is written in statements, a local problem statement. So you transfer that problem statement, which is in general, then which is in concise, should be concise, specific, and oriented. So we will know that now our problem is that the pandemic or COVID-19, may have severe consequences on the economy. So what are the questions that we need to ask to know that consequences? For example, the first one you will ask, what is the impact of COVID-19, on GDP? What is the impact of COVID-19 on employment? Or what is the impact of COVID-19 on the business sector? Or what is the impact of COVID-19 on job opportunities or on even healthcare sector? Uh, it depends what type of particular area you want to study. If you want to stay only in the economy, maybe you focus more on GDP and trade and export. Yes, if you want to go more on, for example, on healthcare sector, and you may also focus on that area, maybe on tourism. So depend on what exactly the area of the economy that you want to focus more. So you have to be more specific. Then you translate those question to an objective. If you, let's say, you ask what is the impact of, let's say, COVID-19 on GDP, then we translate it to objective. We will say to identify the impact of COVID-19 on GDP in Malaysia. Then after you do that, you go to the significance of the study, where it is in a way that what is new in your study. And actually, this significance of study I have already explained, and I say that it is better you keep it when you do literature review, because the significance of study means that how your study is different from others. So you will know that after you do literature review. When you do literature review, you will know what has been done, what has not been done, and what your study can contribute in to advance the knowledge. So what is the new? Is it your study proposing new theory? Is it proposing new methodology? Is it proposing a new data set? Is it proposing new variables? Is it proposing a new measurement of the variables? So it could be anything that you think that it is significantly contribute to the existing knowledge or advance the existing knowledge. Then after that, you give the definition of the key construct or your variables that you are going to use. So make sure that when you talk about the background of the study, you make sure that also you highlight all the possible relationships between the variables or independent variables and dependent variables that you wanted to study. So here, then you are done for this chapter 1, and this is could be from 8 to 10 pages. Then chapter 2, literature review. Here we have 4 parts, or maybe 5. The first one, we talk about relevant theories, concepts, and models related to your study. For example, once our topic is the impact of COVID-19 on economic growth, we can use, for example, indigenous growth model and apply it to how pandemic and disasters or diseases impact the economic growth. We can do that. You can also maybe apply macroeconomic theory and a new classical theory. Those also they talk about how the economy is impacted and what are the external factors that could affect that. I mean, pandemic is also external factor, external variable. So you can relate, how these pandemics and natural disasters, could affect the economic growth and macroeconomic variables. Here you will talk about theories. Maybe you have some concept or some models also can explain, your phenomenon. Then you can use them, not necessary. So after you talk about theories, you will have to discuss critically each theory. What is the advantage of that theory? What is the disadvantage of that theory? What is the limitation of that theory? What are the assumptions of that theory? Then you may put them in a chronological order. For example, the first theory, that developed, and after, because of the limitation, another theory come to advance it, and then because that theory also B has some limitation, then another theory C come and also propose another concept or another model in order to overcome this limitation. In that way, go theory after theory in chronological order and critically discuss them. Then after, let's say you discuss about 2 or 3 or 4 theories, what theory that is more applicable to your research? Could be one, could be two, could be three, I don't know, but depend on the need of your research, it depend on your objective. If you think that only one theory from that all what we discussed from, let's say we discussed four theories, and from that four theories there is only one which is sufficient to explain all your study model, then it's fine. But if you think that you need two or three theories to explain all your variables, then you have to put them all of them and rely on them. So depend, on the how many theory you are going to use, and also this is will be depend on the explanation of your variables. So if one theory can explain all your variables, is fine. If it's not, then you need maybe another theory to back up and explain the remaining variables. So that in the theories you should show the link, or you should use these theories to explain the link between your independent variable and dependent variable theoretically. And also you need to also to show how previous research, or previous researchers criticize the theories or argue with these theories, or they come with agreement with these theories. That is very important. And also, what do you say, what do you think? Do you agree with the theory or you disagree? Do you have any critics for that theory or no? Why? Justify your argument on that. After you do that, do it, let's say, a theory after theory, we go to the second part, and now we will discuss about relevant past studies, which is empirical studies here. So, and here we don't you do it in chronological order like a theory, but we do it in a topical order. Means we will group the studies that have the same topic, that have the same finding, the same conclusion. So let's say the first one, I want to see the relationship between pandemic and GDP. Then I will go and study all bring all the studies who study that relationship between pandemic and GDP, and group. Some studies they found a positive relationship, a negative relationship. When we have pandemic, more pandemic, less GDP. And some study maybe they don't find any significance of the study. So you group those first that who found it significantly impact, negative impact, and explain what method they use, what theory they use, what are they finding. Then bring another group which is they found it insignificant, and also explain what method they use, what theories they use, what finding they found. Then you compare the finding, why the finding are different, why this happened, justify that, and sometimes even you will find some studies they found it positive in the long run. Means that after the pandemic, GDP will also again, increase and perform better. You could find some of the studies maybe on that, and they have their own also justification. So you bring all these studies in a topical order. So those who have found a positive relationship, put them in one group and discuss them. Those who found a negative relationship, put them in one group and discuss them. Those who found no significant or no impact, then bring them together and discuss them. Then explain why these differences and show what is the inconclusiveness. Sometimes these studies they don't come to a conclusion. Means some of them positive, some of them negative, some of them no relationship. Or what are the limitation of these studies? Why they found different finding? Is it because they use different theories? Is it because they use different methodologies, different tests, they use different data? Is it because they use different variables, different measurement of the variables? So this is all you have to take in account to explain in order to do a very good critical discussion for previous empirical studies. After you've done that, now based on your theories that you have discussed in the first part, and based on the empirical studies that you discussed in the second part, you will develop your theoretical framework or conceptual framework. So here you will know what are the most important variables that affect, for example, GDP. Then you will select those variables based on the theory and based on empirical studies and explain them. Those will be the variables, and this the model is work like that. Then from the framework, you will develop the hypothesis. Also hypothesis, you can rely on theories and also in previous empirical studies. One of the hypotheses you can say, for example, the impact of pandemic or COVID-19 on economic is positive, or COVID-19 has a positive impact on GDP, or there is a positive relationship between pandemic and or COVID-19 and GDP. So this is the way how we write an hypothesis. After you finish your hypothesis, you will come to the last one, the gap of literature review. Means what is the gap from the first part and the second part? I mean, those theories, do they have a gap? Do they have limitation? What they are? Actually, you already discussed them. So you just there, you will highlight them in this section. And again, for the previous empirical studies, what are the limitations of these studies? What the things that you think that it's worth to be investigated or need to be investigated, but these previous empirical studies, they have not done so. So you will highlight that also in your gap, and also highlight how your study is going to, fill up this gap. What method is going to use, or what theory is going to use, or what variables is going to use, or what data is going to use in order to fill up these gaps. So this is another way, how to do your literature review or second part. So once we're done with this, we go to the methodology part. In the methodology part, the first thing we talk about our research design. I have been explained in previous videos that we have so many type of research design, but I want to emphasize that here, that in your assignment, or maybe even in your FYP, we need mostly two research design that you focus more. The first one, correlational research design or design, and the second is cause design or causal cause effect design. So in the correlational research design, you may use it, for example, in your introduction, where you are developing this relationship between your pandemic and GDP. Also, you can rely on that by using, for example, graph and tables, and even you can do some tests like a correlation test if you want to establish that relationship. But to go to the second part, which is the important, now we know that there is correlation, we know that there is a relationship between the pandemic or COVID-19 and GDP, but we don't know which one is, if really there is a significant impact or no. So that one, you go to causal or the cause effect research design. So you will talk about the cause effect research design, that this study is going to use the cause effect research design or causal design, and why you give the reason or justification to use that, because you want to find the impact of pandemic or COVID-19 on GDP. Then after you do that, you will talk about the data collection method. How you're going to collect the data. Is it primary data collection? I mean, we are going to go to the field or no? Since we are going to talk about pandemic, so most likely maybe it will be secondary data. Or maybe you want to see how the COVID-19 impacted business rather than the economy. So you may do a survey or questionnaire and give it to business people. I mean, you give them to companies, SMEs, and see what will be the impact. In that case, then your data collection will be primary data collection, not secondary, and you are going to develop the questionnaire. Then what is the design of sampling? Who are the target population? If you are doing, let's say, the impact of COVID-19 on business, then your target population will be companies, SMEs, enterprises. If you are doing on the economy, then in this case, your population will be countries, right? Then after, what is the frame and location of sampling? So here, for example, if you are doing on business, the impact of COVID-19 on business, your sampling, your will be, how to select that the sample that represent, your population. So you may select particular SMEs or particular companies or particular enterprises, and you give justification why these are representing the whole population, and based on what method you think that those or this sample representing the total population. So here means that we talk about the technique of sampling. Is it random sampling, or non-probability random sampling, probability random sampling, or we call it a volunteer sampling method. So there is so many sampling methods. You can go back and check the previous video in chapter 3. You can find all these. I'm not going to talk about them all. Then the sample size or size of sampling, how you calculate it. Basically, we have formula. One of them, or two of the formulas also I already explained in chapter 3. You can go back there and check them. So basically, if let's say you have one, you choose your population is SMEs. How many SMEs first in Malaysia there is? If there is 10,000 SMEs, then you are going to go and check via this formula what is the sample size that could be representing this 10,000 population of SMEs, and therefore you will get the minimum sample size that you need to collect. Then after that, we talk about the research instrument. As we say that here we say if we are going to collect the data, primary data, we are developing a questionnaire. So we will discuss about the questionnaire, how we design the questionnaire, from where we adopt it or adapt it. Is it self-developed or we take it from other researcher? If it is self-developed, we have to show that clearly what are the items that were self-developed and what are the items that are not self-developed. Then variables measurement, how we measure the variables, how we define them. If let's say a pandemic, how we define the pandemic, how we define COVID-19, and is it you want to see number of cases that happens in Malaysia or number of deaths, or other measurement that you think more is fit to your model. Then, since the questionnaire is adopted and adapted or self-developed, therefore we have to check for the reliability. And this is we already talk about that. So in that case, we check if the questionnaire is reliable or no, and also if the questionnaire is valid or no. You can also back to chapter number 3 and also lecture number 4, and we talk also about reliability and validity, and you can also explain on that. Then, since you're doing questionnaire, what are the ethical consideration? I mean, is that any ethical consideration that you want to highlight? And this is only if you are doing a questionnaire. But if you are doing secondary data, I don't think that you need that. And also, if you are doing secondary data, you're doing also about reliability and validity. But before you go and distribute, let's say, the questionnaire to the whole population, also we will talk about the pilot test. The pilot test basically will be conducted on small group of people or those sample size, let's say maybe 30 to 50, in order to make sure that our questionnaire is reliable and valid. And this is that you just need to explain. Actually, you don't need to go and do the pilot study, a pilot test or pilot study. You don't need to go and collect the data, and you don't need to go and design your questionnaire in your assignment now, but you just explain how you are going to do it if you want to do it. Then the last one, it is the data analysis technique. What technique you want to use? If you are going to use, let's say, you secondary data, and you collect time series data, then your data analysis technique could be, for example, co-integration, causality or Granger causality impact, or short run, also a long run relationship between the two variables. If your data is cross-sectional, maybe you are going to use OLS, ordinary least square analysis, or maybe I want, if let's say your data is primary, maybe you use path analysis, maybe you use SmartPLS, or maybe you use also simple OLS, or maybe you use ANOVA, MANOVA, or t-test or f-test. So it depends on your questions or your objective, and then you will decide the data techniques or data analysis techniques. Are also depend on the nature of your data. If you have panel data, you may use a random effect or fixed effect, Hausman test. You see, so it's depend on the nature of your data and what are your objective you want to achieve. So you can see it's very systematic. You just need to explain all of the things. I want to emphasize again, you do not need to develop the questionnaire in your proposal 1, 2, 3 that you need to do. but you just need to explain how you are going to design it. For example, what are the items you should ask, for example, or what are the variables that could be included in that questionnaire. And also, you don't need to go and do the reliability and validity of the questionnaire, but you just need to explain that you are going to do it. If you do a research, of course, since it is just a proposal, so you don't need to go and do the pilot study and calculate what is reliability and validity. No, but you just explain about it, that this research will consider also about the questionnaire reliability and how you are going to calculate it, and consider about the validity and how you are going to do it also. And also, you don't need also to do the pilot test, but you just explain that this study is going to do the pilot test for that reason, to find the reliability and the validity of that things. And also, you're not going to do the data analysis, per se, but you're just going to explain what data analysis techniques you are going to use. So don't confuse. This is just a proposal, not the word research. I hope now you are clear about my explanation. I hope that you understand and you can perform now well on your chapter 1, 2, and 3. If you still have any question, do not hesitate to contact me at email or in Teams or via WhatsApp. You have all this information. I wish you good luck and thank you very much.